Well, hey there, and welcome to APUSH History with Lennox. I'm Lennox, and today we're continuing in Unit 2 of the AP curriculum, which covers 1607 to 1754. Today we're getting specifically into topic 2.4, and that's dealing with transatlantic trade. Now, the big idea I want you to focus on as we go through this is that colonization was viable for the European countries due to the fact that it produced huge amounts of wealth. And we're going to look at how and why that happened. Now, what you have to understand is during the 17th and 18th centuries, global trade actually was developed and expanded throughout the world. Hence, we call it global trade. And one part of that global trade network was the transatlantic trade. Transatlantic means we're going trans across Atlantic, the Atlantic Ocean. So we're talking about trade between Europe and the Americas. Now, how they did that was through a process that we refer to as triangular trade. Now, triangular trade was a network that was created in this global economy, in this transatlantic exchange system. Essentially, if you look at a map, the trade routes kind of look like a triangle. And let me talk you through how it flowed, using just a few of the commodities. We're going to start down in the West Indies. And we talked about in a previous video about how sugarcane had become the major cash crop being exported from the West Indies. That sugarcane is going to be transported up to the New England region of the English colonies. There they will trade that for rum. Rum is actually produced with sugar. So once they had the rum, now we're going to take the rum from the New England region to the west coast of Africa. There it will be traded for African slaves. The African slaves will then be put on board ships where they will be transferred back to the West Indies, the beginning of the triangle. Now, that route between Africa and the West Indies is often called the Middle Passage. And you need to be familiar with this term. Every time you study the Middle Passage, you probably will see this picture. And you can see how these ships were packed with human beings from stern to bow, with as many people as they could possibly get on the ships. I just recently learned, however, that this image was created after laws had been passed that actually limited the number of slaves each ship could have on it. So I can only imagine how much worse it was before the Slave Trade Act was passed by the English government. What we're seeing in all of this is an economic system that became the dominant system of Europe at the time. And that system was called mercantilism. Mercantilism is based on a worldview that there is a limited or fixed amount of wealth available in the world. And in all honesty, that view is pretty accurate because it was based on gold and silver. And there is a limited amount of gold and silver in the world. So these countries are racing to get their share of the pie, and you want the biggest slice of pie. So what each country did under mercantilism is they had to have what is known as a favorable balance of trade, which essentially means we are exporting more goods than we are importing into our country. We are selling more than we are buying. Within this whole framework of mercantilism, this is where colonies became very important to the European powers. Because from the colonies, especially when we talk about the English colonies, you could extract a lot of raw materials that could then be developed into manufactured goods, which could be sold worldwide. But it could also be sold in your colonies. So not only are you extracting raw materials from your colonies also provide you with a market to sell your manufactured goods. So now that we have our system of mercantilism put in place, we got to protect it. And what you're going to see the English government do is they're going to pass a series of navigation acts. And the purpose of these acts was to protect their trade in this global economy. It required all merchants to engage with the English colonies exclusively using English ships. So you can only use English ships to trade with the English colonies. Also, any non-perishable trade goods entering into the colonies, they had to go through English ports before they went anywhere else. And this allowed England to collect taxes on all those goods. So Lennox, what is the effect of all this? Well, there's several things that happen. Number one, mercantilism is going to create this windfall of wealth for the elites, for merchants, and for plantation owners. It's also going to transform some of the colonial societies in that seaport towns are going to become large urban centers. It's also going to launch a consumer revolution where people are buying more goods than creating. And the more goods you have, the more prestige you have. In the past, prestige in a society was generally based on your family name, your bloodline. But as mercantilism grows, the more stuff you have, the more prestige you have. The fallout of all this, it severely limited the development of colonial economies. It was propping up the mother countries, but the local colonial economies weren't doing nearly as well. So that's a brief overview of the transatlantic trade and the effect that it had on the colonies and the European countries. One thing you might want to keep in mind was, though this economic system was established, what was also established during this time was a system called salutary neglect. Yeah, England put some laws in to control trade, but they loosely enforced those laws. And salutary neglect is going to become the norm for the English colonies going forward. But we'll talk more about that in a future video. For now, if you have any questions, post them in the comments. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.